On Press Perspective today, we touch upon travel trends here in capital Seoul among foreign travelers amid the growing popularity of K-pop, K-beauty, K-food, and more. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Wednesday, April 29th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. South Korea welcomed a record number of foreign tourists during the first quarter of this year, with over 4.7 million landing in the country, up 23% on year. For more on this, I have travel writer and editor Cathy Adams joining me from London. Cathy, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Hello, so happy to be here.
I also have Professor Bae So-young at the College of Hotel and Tourism Management at Kyung University. Professor Bae, it's lovely to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Lovely. Cathy, we start with you. In a recent article for the Sunday Times, you called Seoul Asia's most thrilling city. Let's start with some context behind this very generous compliment.
Well, hello, and I can absolutely say that still is the case. So I was in Seoul a couple of weeks ago for the launch of Virgin Atlantic's inaugural flight from London to Seoul. And it's the first British carrier, I believe, to ever link the two cities. So that's very exciting. I'm no stranger to Asia either. I've spent a long time living in Hong Kong, so have travelled to Japan, mainland China, Korea as well. So it's not my first time in the city. What I love most, though, about Seoul is it's got this amazing sort of past and future energy that you really don't get anywhere else. You have these, Joseon dynasty palaces, gorgeous sprawling palaces, cherry blossom, and then these huge futuristic neighborhoods, giant skyscrapers. I mean, look, I'm looking here at sort of 10-lane highways. So that to me is what really sums up Seoul. Obviously, I have traveled beyond Seoul as well, but yeah, for this particular trip, we just stayed within the city itself. I mean, there's been a huge, especially among, Western tourists, there's been a huge boom in Korean culture over the past sort of 10 years and real interest from Brits in traveling to South Korea. And I think a lot of that is to do with, the K-wave that we've been speaking about. We're talking K-pop, K-dramas and K-beauty, which I didn't realize until I got to Seoul a few weeks ago, just how big a deal it actually is. It is a massive reason for people actually traveling to Seoul just to go shopping in Olive Young, which obviously I did as well. But yeah, over the couple of days we're in town, I mean, we had an absolutely fantastic time. We obviously went shopping, as I just said, walked around neighborhoods, which just really pulse with life in a way that you don't get in other Asian cities. And obviously we ended up doing a K-pop dance class, which, well, let's just say I wasn't most natural at, but I'd love to give it another go. It just was a really great sort of 48 hours. Obviously, food and drink as well was absolutely phenomenal. Korean food, I really love. There are loads of great Korean restaurants in London, but it just doesn't compare to actually having Korean food in Korea. So yeah, we had an absolutely fantastic time. And it really is one of my favorite cities in Asia, which is just built on from various visits over the years.
Yeah, K-pop dance, it's a daunting task, seriously. Professor Bae, South Korea welcomed a record number of foreign travelers during the first quarter of this year, as I mentioned in the short clip. What are the broader implications of this latest finding, do you think?
Yeah, I would say this is just more than like a post-pandemic recovery, but it actually signals a structural shift in Korea's inbound tourism market. So in the first quarter of 2026, South Korea recorded its highest ever number of inbound tourists, representing a 23% increase compared to the previous year. And the scale itself, it's notable, but what matters more is the changing composition of demand, because traditionally Korea relied heavily on nearby Asian markets, but we are now seeing remarkable growth from long-haul markets, such as the United States and Europe, and driven by K-culture, including K-pop, food and beauty and lifestyle contents and many more. So it means Korea is evolving from a short distance, short stay destination into a global cultural destination with a stronger pull factors. And also from like a market perspective, there are like two implications. I think first of all, it improves resilience by diversifying demand beyond Asia, which reduces vulnerability to regional shocks. And second of all, like long haul tourists typically stay longer and they spend more, so which will increase economic impact.
Right, of course. Cathy, I believe that your first travel piece on South Korea was published back in the year 2015. What have been some of the changes in travel trends and perceptions among those in the UK regarding South Korea since then?
Well, it's a great question. And I would say that 10 years ago, things were so different in terms of how people viewed Korea. And things really have kicked off only through K-pop and K-culture and this whole K-wave. And that really is down to why people now, it's on people's radar. I think 10 years ago, when I said, or 11 years ago actually now, and people said, oh my gosh, you're going to South Korea. Where even is that? And it was very much viewed as a sort of cheaper version to Japan. Brits have always loved going to Japan. There's a very sort of strong flow of tourism there. But Korea was very much seen as kind of under the radar. What has also happened in the past decade, I would say, in the UK is that we've had, well, globally as well, there's been a real boom in over-tourism to various destinations. Japan has seen this very keenly in places like Kyoto, Tokyo, Osaka, whereas Korea has not really suffered from the same sort of surge in tourism. So what people have looked for over the past decade is under the radar places, and Korea fits that bill really, really well. Just looking at the numbers of Brits. So in 2024, the latest figures available, 140,000 UK tourists visited South Korea. I mean, that's still up 15% on the year before, but I think something like 500,000 people visited Japan. So there is still that real disconnect. And people do, again, they love cherry blossom, and that has been a real driver of tourism over the past, decade, I would say. But really, a lot of it is down to Korean culture, and it's just really exploded here. People are obsessed. Shows like Squid Game, Korean Beauty, and K-pop bands like BTS, even Psy back in the Gangnam Style days. That actually was the reason that I visited Seoul for the first time. I loved that song so much, and I really wanted to go to Gangnam, where it essentially, it inspired that amazing earworm of a tune. So yeah, things are definitely, improving. They're on the up, and especially with this new route from Virgin Atlantic, I think a lot more people are going to start arriving.
Right, fingers crossed for that. In the meantime, Professor Pitt, the government has elevated its top tourism policy body, the National Tourism Strategy Council, from the Prime Minister's office to the President's office. What more changes do you expect, Professor Pitt?
Yes, this is a very meaningful institutional shift. The National Tourism Strategy Council is the highest level decision-making body for tourism. Now it's been elevated to a presidential level system, which definitely signals that the government intends to strengthen tourism as a national strategic industry. So practically, I expect some changes. Like, first of all, stronger coordination across ministries. Tourism is complex. So tourism is inherently interconnected with visas, aviation, transport, culture, and regional development, and also digital services. So like policies used to be delayed because multiple ministry had to align. But with presidential leadership, we can expect faster and more integrated decision making. Second of all, more proactive and large-scale policy implementation. So it can include expanding like visa facilitation or accelerating regional tourism infrastructure development and allocating more substantial budget. So in other words, like tourism policy may shift from fragmented initiatives to more coordinated national strategies. And actually, importantly, as a follow-on measure of this change, the government has launched the public policy contest to gather ideas directly from the public, like citizens and industry stakeholders. So I think this is very significant because it suggests a move toward more like field-oriented and demand-driven policy design.
Right. Cathy, just out of curiosity, what do package tours to South Korea offered by travel agencies there in the UK often include?
Okay, so most will start in Seoul, and that makes sense because that is the capital city, and there is airlift to Seoul. Lots of different flights will land in Seoul from, connecting points all across Asia. So that is always the starting point. Usually, they'll do a sort of 2 week itinerary, which I feel like is a fair amount of time to, really get to grips with South Korea. So they'll start in Seoul. They'll usually always go down to Busan, gorgeous coastal city, as we all know, in the south of the country, and then Jeonju as well. I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation of that. That is the sort of key framework for, say, a 2 week itinerary. But then many will go to, a range of different places. So I mean, a typical itinerary, it obviously looks around Seoul's palaces. Then we could go up to the Soared National Park. Andong as well is a popular one. Although interestingly, I've spent a couple of days in Jeju Island, and I thought that was phenomenal. And I'm yet to see that on any package tour offered by a UK operator. So that is something I think that could be added on. There's also obviously trips to the DMZ. That's an incredibly popular site for British tourists. It's obviously a fascinating place to go, and North Korea is somewhere that we never hear much about. So yeah, that's always a popular add-on. Interestingly, I was looking into this, and a tour operator here, Selective Asia, it said that it's reported 176% year-on-year increase in inquiries for South Korea over the past couple of months. And that is purely thanks to this Virgin Atlantic flight. So yeah, it's clear that people are really thinking about, coming to South Korea and how they can package it up. But I would say very, very broadly, people will look at doing, say, Seoul, Busan, Jeonju, and then obviously the DMZ as well, because they want to have that mix of city and coast. And a lot of them will use your amazing train system. I mean, speaking as a British person who has a rubbish train system to use, the Korean system is absolutely amazing. So yeah, it's designed to give you a real kind of full picture, full package.
Right, Cathy, you are too kind. Right, Professor Bae, here in South Korea, the number of foreign travelers entering the country via regional airports, that's also surged by 50% on year. Pundits have proposed making productive use of this phenomenon to bolster tourism beyond the greater Seoul area. Professor Bae, what do you propose?
Well, the recent numbers are very, very encouraging. So in the first quarter 2026, more than 850,000 foreign visitors entered Korea through regional airports. It's about 50% more than a year earlier. So foreign visitors' use of rail also increased by 46%, and also regional visit rate also rose to 34%. So I believe the key driver is the synergy between like enhanced accessibility and also some local identity, local attractions. And the expansion of direct international routes to like Gimhae, Cheongju, and Jeju has also significantly lowered the entry barrier. However, I think airport routes are not like everything. It's just the beginning. To sustain this growth, we must ensure like seamless connectivity, convenient local transport and also language support, and some, integrated payment system that link airport to attractions and hotels. And also at the same time, like regions should offer some different content, like distinctive content that Seoul cannot really replicate. So authentic local cuisine, heritage, and some more like wellness experiences, for example. The good news is that like regional stays and spending are also rising. So the opportunity is real, it's right there, but regions must become actually easy to visit and also worth staying overnight.
Right. Cathy, speaking as a person with first-hand experience as a foreign traveler to South Korea, of course, what do you propose to boost foreign travel beyond the capital area?
I mean, Professor Bae makes some really interesting points, specifically about airlift and, the ability of tourists to travel. And that really is the key thing for me. So there was a lot of talk from Virgin Atlantic about hooking into Korean Air's regional network. So you offer Seoul as a kind of hub and spoke opportunity to, land in Seoul and then travel through to these different regions. And that really is, I think, number one. It's kind of making it logistically much easier to get around, because there is obviously a propensity to land in a capital city and then only stay in Seoul. As wonderful as it is, again, Professor Bay makes some really good points. There is a lot more that, tourists can see. Using trains as well, I think that's also a really great opportunity. Train travel, we've seen, really boom in popularity for sustainability reasons, for just experiential reasons as well over the past 10 years. So trains, again, encouraging people to get on trains. I really think, though, that there isn't much, like, people don't need much of an opportunity or much encouragement to go out and discover these under the radar places. I think labeling something as, free of crowds, being under the radar, that is often enough of an enticement. Again, wellness opportunities, that's been a big travel trend. Lots of great spas, lots of Oni and career things. And I think it's about getting that message across, that getting out and seeing, the real Korea, and sort of seeing life as it's lived in this most fascinating country, getting that message across that if you leave the capital city, then that's what you can see. The other thing that I haven't mentioned is affordability, and that's been something that has driven many travellers, especially from Britain, over the past, 5 years with the cost of living crisis here. So getting the message across that if you leave Seoul, it's actually incredibly affordable, as well as being under the radar, and really getting to live that kind of local life. Those are those 3 points that I think you need to convince tourists of, and then that's what's going to make them go.
Right. Professor Wei, on a more cautious note, market analysts here point to the danger of complete dependence on the Korean wave to maintain the tourism industry. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the concern is quite valid. So Korean wave, it's getting popular, and Hallyu, it's incredibly powerful hook that brings people to Korea for the first time. But, if you think about like long-term tourism demand, it cannot be the only anchor, I think. So the real challenge begins after their first visit. So in fact, Korea's overall visitor satisfaction is quite high. So according to the recent survey, about 90% actually they said they are satisfied with their first visit. But on the other hand, the repeat visitation still depends heavily on the quality of on-the-ground experiences like service attitude or price transparency or language support, or just how easy it is to travel around the city and travel beyond Seoul. So there is a clear gap that exists in between. So there is often a difference between, the expectation shaped by K culture, like a fantasy, and also the actual travel experiences. So the next stage should be what I would call like quality tourism experiences. So we need to improve not only infrastructure, but also like soft factor. At the same time, Korea needs to diversify its tourism portfolio using like under-leveraged assets, like rich historical heritage and authentic local cuisine. So it should be beyond like Seoul, Busan, and Jeonju, as Cathy mentioned. So which can appeal even to visitors who are not necessarily K-pop fans. So Hallyu can bring visitors in, but only a high quality, well-rounded overall tourism experiences can bring them back.
Right, good point then. Cathy, speaking as an experienced traveler yourself, what do you believe are the factors that are likely to encourage return visits to South Korea?
Well, I would agree with everything that Professor Bate just said, actually, as well, although I do have a few more things to add. One of which is the visa requirement, which I know you touched upon a little bit earlier. I think I only had to fill in a sort of digital e-arrival card for Korea, but even that is a boundary, and it is a barrier to entry. So I think removing any sort of admin around arrival is job number one. Specifically, visas and any sort of airport process, that is always a big turn-off for all visitors coming in. Also, flights, of course. I keep talking about the Virgin Atlantic flight, but that is something, and airlift is something that is so crucial. We all want to be able to fly direct, especially in an era of Middle East disruption where a lot of the sort of connecting flights are now cut off for a lot of the world. So direct flights, absolutely crucial. The ability to book package tours very easily, potential day trips. I don't know, it could be sort of just tours, like that, for that to be very easy and in English as well, obviously. Affordability, I know I've touched upon that already, but just to give you a comparison, my stay at the Mondrian in Seoul, which I thought was a really, really cool hotel, it had a really good vibe, that was actually incredibly affordable. And that is a message that I think people, need to understand, that Korea is incredibly affordable, and it makes a great alternative, a crowd-free alternative to somewhere like Tokyo. I think as well, it's just about a feeling, isn't it? And there's nothing that anyone can do to encourage this. But I came away from my recent visit to Seoul just feeling really, I suppose, sort of hopeful for the way that things are going. It's a very futuristic place. It's a very warm, friendly place. It's a very safe place as well. And I think actually that can't be overstated. In terms of safety, as a woman, a female traveling alone, I felt incredibly safe. I could access Wi-Fi everywhere. Ubers were, like very, very, well, I mean, they were everywhere. They were easy to get. They're very accessible. So that is a feeling. I came away feeling very safe and warm and, yes, hopeful, sort of looking at the way that South Koreans were living their life.
Right, indeed. Safe Seoul, alliteration there. Hopefully, Cathy, we get a chance to see you here in Seoul in the near future then. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts today. And Professor Bae, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, for those of you interested, the Seoul Welcome Week begins this coming Friday, that is May 1st, until the 8th. And during this week, a series of hospitality events as well as immersive cultural programs are open to foreign visitors. On that note, we say goodbye. See you same time tomorrow. Thank you for now.